Gavin Guile versus Kaladin Stormblessed in the 6 or 7 categories, depending on whether or not the last one matters: origin, development, role, interest for the reader, relationships, who would win in a fight, and of course, the tiebreaker that matters only if the tie comes around: who would do better in the other's world. Getting straight into it with these two, Gavin Guile's origin. Seriously, spoiler warning, he's not Gavin, he is Dazen. He is the brother that killed the god of this society and assumed his twin brother's role. He is basically now the religious center due to that. He is the better brother, while at the same time not necessarily being the nicest guy in the world. Still a bit of an egotist, but certainly better than the alternative. As far as we know at the beginning of the series, no one knows he switched his role except for his mother. But as it comes more clear down the road, his father as well is aware of the fact that this is Dazen and not Gavin Guile. Being pushed out of the family in such a drastic way and literally murdering his brother as a way back into the family is pretty extreme origin, and something that is completely original to the fantasy genre as I am concerned in terms of becoming a god of the society after doing so. So I'm going to give Brent Weeks a ton of props here for having just a crazy origin for one of your main protagonists. It's absolutely insane and a great execution of such an original concept. That being said, going up against Kaladin, he also has an amazing origin, one that's much more grounded for the reader. Kaladin was a rising star in the military, an absolute powerhouse on the battlefield, until he was betrayed by a light-eyed commander, lost everything that meant anything to him at that point. Because he had already lost so much, that wasn't very much, essentially just his men, and Kaladin is then sold into slavery and brought down in a very drastic way. This betrayal sets up the character of Kaladin incredibly well, and the execution of this origin is arguably Brandon Sanderson's best execution for any character ever. I am a huge fan of it. It's just as original as Gavin Guile's in most ways, and I just think the execution might be a little bit better. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give the origin point here to Kaladin Stormblessed. Next up, we have development, and both of these two develop very drastically. Kaladin develops in a way where he kind of maintains his level of relatability and definitely stays very grounded, while kind of elevating up into a higher position and kind of becoming a more powerful character overall. We as the reader kind of can still relate to him, even when he starts supermanning it up and flying around saving people. On his emotional development, he begins to forgive Light Eyes in general and become more accepting, even though at this point he is still struggling with that idea quite a bit. On the other hand, Gavin Guile's development, or Dazen Guile, God, that's never not going to be confusing, really grounds him more and more as the series progresses, finding out the level of insanity that actually exists in this guy's head, the fact that his brother has been dead for a long time, moving into him becoming more human, basically showing that this guy is not exactly dealing with all the stress and pressure of his position in life very well. Dazen is one of the most relatable, godly characters I've ever seen, and that is because of his development. Seeing him really struggle to maintain a good moral conviction while completely lacking faith in the position that he's been placed into. It's incredibly interesting, and I give Brent Weeks, again, a lot of respect for the execution of development here. I think I will slightly give Gavin/Dazen Guile the development role so far in their respective series over Kaladin, just because seeing Dazen broken in such extreme ways is absolutely heart-wrenching at times and makes someone who should be so unrelatable so easy to connect with. Next up, we have the role they play in the world they are in. Now, Gavin Guile has a pretty interesting role. He's a religious center. He's a figurehead of pretty much everything going on. He is the most famous, important person in this world, period. Also one of the most critical people of the battlefield, and to us, the reader, he is the introduction to the magic system, as well as the wider concepts and the kind of, and showing the more ridiculous side of this society that exists, kind of more poking fun at it, allowing us as the reader on the outside to look into it with clearer eyes. Kaladin, on the other hand, fits into a Chosen One trope. That being said, there's quite a few existing subversions to that Chosen One trope that allow Kaladin to remain fairly interesting for being what he is. Although overall, I'm going to go ahead and give role here to Gavin Guile / Gavin Guile. Just Dazen's role as a whole is so much more crucial and critical to his world. And while maybe for the reader he doesn't play quite as critical a role as Kaladin does, certainly within the existing universe established, Gavin is more important than Kaladin, and the execution of that role, I think, is just as good for Gavin / Dazen. I can't say Dazen in the title because it's a spoiler, but I can say it in here. It's so difficult and annoying, but I have to stick with Gavin, I guess. Next up, we have interest for the reader. Kaladin's interest is, in my opinion, the second greatest interest of any character in the Stormlight, only toppled by Dalinar, and that's only at certain times. He is absolutely a total page turner, and a lot of his interest is from different aspects of himself. There's no real one driving source of interest for Kaladin. It comes from a mixture of his relationships, his role, his personality, and general characteristics. All these things kind of come together to really make a character you love and care about. So it's really hard for Gavin to even stand a chance when it comes to knocking down Kaladin for interest, and I don't think he does at all. Yes, Gavin is very interesting, but Kaladin to me is just something special. He's a page turner to the nth degree. Meanwhile, Gavin is just really interesting, but there's a special place in my heart for Kaladin's interest in his series. I just think it's so wonderfully executed, and every little minor plot he's involved with is enhanced for having Kaladin be a part of it. Next up, we have relationships, and these two both have great relationships. Kaladin's best is obviously Syl, followed up by a kind of middling romance with Shallan, and a great power dynamic with Dalinar, where these two really respect each other. And I think Dalinar wants to be more like Kaladin in a way. He actually really admires him because he does not see him entirely clearly. On the other hand, Gavin / Dazen's relationships are really complex. The one with his father is so messed up, but also so interesting. The relationship he has with the religious system around him, other nobles, his love interest, himself, his brother who he's kept prisoner until we find out not. All these things really do make Dazen / Gavin / whatever, I'm going to keep saying it, earn the point here. He is a Goliath of relationship. It's what makes him the most interesting, where a lot of his interest comes from, which is really appreciated for a godly figure, because many authors would just fall back and rely on their power, making them interesting, but that is not the case with Dazen. He is just interesting as a whole. One addition to this that I think really pushes him over the edge is how his brother's relationships have kind of inherited and become his relationships, something I really kind of appreciate, and it's really a unique aspect to his character. So a lot of props there from Brent Weeks. And moving on, Dazen / Gavin gets the relationship point. Now we have who would win in a fight. I think Kaladin is an incredible fighter, probably more technically skilled in a lot of ways than Gavin / Dazen, but unfortunately Dazen has an incredible arsenal of magic at his disposal that is limitless, and all he would have to do is wait Kaladin out. Assuming Kaladin's not in the middle of a storm or does not have an infinite supply of Stormlight, Dazen has a pretty much infinite supply of his magic, and he has Black Luxon. All of these things put together, and in his most desperate state, I think at the end of the day, it would just be Dazen waiting out Kaladin and then striking hard and fast. He might not even have to wait him out. He might be able to just encase him in Luxon, set him on fire, or do all kinds of other terrible things. I mean, we've never even seen Dazen go Green Golem, which he certainly has the ability to do, and at that point, he's essentially the Hulk, and Kaladin would not stand a chance. So this point also goes to Gavin. Next up, we have who would do better in the other's world. Kaladin going into the Lightbringer world would be at a disadvantage. There's no Stormlight, and as many people pointed out before when I talked about Dalinar, yes, he would not have access to Stormlight, but I wasn't really giving him the point because of his Stormlight abilities. I just think mentally he would do better in the Wheel of Time than Moraine would in in the Stormlight Archive, but that's unrelated. Back to this. Kaladin would struggle in Lightbringer substantially. He's used to being fairly unique in terms of the magic capabilities he has, but stepping into Lightbringer, there are magic users that are far above him, and with his light source being so limited, he would run out, and hopefully he could keep Syl, but that is not guaranteed, so he would eventually just becoming a very good soldier again. Flip side, Dazen has pretty much infinite access to his magic as long as there is light, and if he stepped into the Stormlight Archive, there's certainly enough light for him to keep going. It's not a scarce resource there. He could, without a doubt, turn around and become one of the most powerful magic users in that land, if not the most, and maybe even influence which ways the wars go. And I don't think he would necessarily ally himself with one side or the other. I think he would be self-serving because he does not have any attachment to anyone in this world, and probably be fairly successful. He's a hard dude to kill, and since he's outside of his world, no one would kill him on an interval of a 7-year. He'd be fine, and for that reason, he gets the final point as well, and the victory. This might be the most fun fight I've ever done. I really enjoyed kind of sitting down and dissecting these two and comparing them because I'm so attached to both. They are both fantastic characters for the world they are in. It's hard to talk about Dazen, so I almost wish he'd been knocked out because it's a spoiler for him right away that you cannot avoid if you're going to talk about his character in any meaningful way. But that being said, I hope you guys liked the video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support the channel and what I do here. Have a great day, y'all. Peace.